Yeah, okay, so
Okay,
welcome back everyone. So today it's our pleasure to have Mohammad Tabish, who will be talking about learning dynamical systems from data, dictionary optimization, and neural networks. Yeah, thank you, Mohammed.
okay. So hello everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Mohammad Tabish, and I'm a PhD student in MacMix CDT, which is like Mathematical Modeling, Analysis, and Computation Center for Doctoral Training with University of Edinburgh and Heriot-Watt University. I'm based in Heriot-Watt University, but also affiliated to the University of Edinburgh. And I would like to start by thanking my supervisors and collaborators for allowing me to work under their supervision and Stefan for the most crucial comments on this work. Uh, so yeah, this work is about learning dynamical systems from data with dictionary optimizations and randomized neural networks, which we'll know in later slides what they are. So the overview of the talk is I will briefly start by motivating this research area. What's the motivation behind this? And briefly introduce the related concepts like background concepts required for this research. Then the first algorithms that we propose related to dictionary optimization using gradient descent based techniques. Then how can we translate to randomized neural networks? How do they perform in experimental analysis? And then conclude my talk with that. Okay, so I've been recently thinking for this talk how to find a good example to relate and uh, give you in few sentences what this whole research area is about. So I came up with this idea of what I'm doing currently now is basically giving you the whole 2 years of my research, what I've been doing for the past 2 years within like few minutes. It's just 30-40 minutes talk, and I will give you the main conclusions of what I achieved instead of giving you like each and every detail of what code I've written, how we came up with these techniques. I'm just giving few results. I think this is what these techniques are about also, like understanding the complex dynamical systems from a global point of view rather than going into the details of underlying mechanisms or analyzing the closed form solutions or doing all sorts of analytical mathematics on the systems itself. We are interested in getting the characteristic properties of the system just from data from which from which the data is extracted of the system. So what I mean by investigating the characteristic properties is, for example, we have simulation of molecules. So it is molecular dynamics, and we are interested in finding, say, what would be the metastable states of the molecule, like when is molecule most stable, when unstable, how are the slow and fast transitions happening, conformation changes in fluid dynamics, turbulence, coherent structure, so on and so forth. Like these are the global properties that we can study. And there are lots of dynamical systems and lots of their characteristic properties that we can understand with these techniques. Okay, so here is types of complex dynamical system that I'm currently dealing with in my research. This is molecular dynamics. This is the simulation of a protein molecule from D. Shaw Research Company, which has these specialized computers to simulate high-dimensional protein molecules. You can see sometimes the molecule is in stable state, sometimes it is folded, sometimes unfolded. And these are the global properties that we want to know, not by the mathematical equations, but just by the data we have, these simulation data. Okay, the molecule itself is very high dimensional if you consider the states of the atoms itself. Another is you can see this fluid dynamics. It is this is Bickley-Jack here, example of simplified example of turbulent flow having coherent structures. You can see some particles are moving coherently, like they are not mixing with the flow or dispersing in the liquid, but they are like together. So they are coherent as the dynamics are forwarding. You can see this structure here. You can see structure here and in the middle. Okay, so yeah, these are the characteristic properties that we are interested in. So identifying these metastable state on the right, top right, you can see left, sorry, uh, folded states of the molecule, like when the protein molecule is in stable states. On the right, figure B is the unstable states. You can see very chaotic and the molecule is in unfolded state. On bottom, you can see the particles in yellow in Wickle jet. They are coherent sets. So over the time, as the fluid flow, they are moving coherently. So these we saw in the videos as well. Okay, so the question is what are transfer operators and how do they help us in analyzing these uh, characteristic properties of system? So transfer operators mainly that we will see today is the Perron-Frobenius and Koopman operator, which are two most famous examples that are being used to analyze the complex dynamical systems from data is, so what Perron-Frobenius operator is, basically it tells us, given the density of the system at time t, what will be the density after the time tau. So it gives you the density you can see on the right at time t plus tau. Similarly, the Koopman operator tells us observables. Suppose we have any observable at time t, what will be its value after time tau? So you can see on the right that it's telling us the expectation of that observable at time t plus tau. This is what they do. And if we are able to get the eigenvalues and eigenfunctions of these operators, then we can see how they inform us about the global behavior of the system, which we'll see in the later slides as well. Okay, so this is the pictorial representation of what these transfer operators are doing. On the uh, top part of this figure, you can see dynamical systems in a state form. Like you have these states x1, x2, x3 with a flow map giving you the states of the system after time, next step in time. So the state of the system at x1 is going to pi of x1, then pi of x2, and so on. So what we can do is parameterize the same system, not in terms of the states itself, but some observables. So instead of analyzing the states of the system, we can see how the observables on the system are evolving. So for example, these functions in the bottom, like are the functions on the state of system. Observable, when I say observable, I mean uh, any observable, like for example, in molecular dynamics, an observable could be to see the distances between two residues of the molecule, any observable. And then Koopman operator is telling us what the value of observable is after time, next time step in the system. So we are doing some sort of trade-off in parameterizing the system here. So the above system is finite dimensional because the states of the systems are finite, but it's highly nonlinear. What we are doing is transforming this system into the system of observables, which is infinite dimensional, but we have this advantage of the system becoming linear. So it's a lot more easier to now analyze the system. But the caveat is we have an infinite dimensional system now, and definitely we cannot ask the computer to do infinite calculations for us. So we have to have a finite dimensional approximation of this operator, and that's what this research is about, how to make it efficient, the finite dimensional approximation of Koopman operator from data. Okay, so let's understand the data from system, how it looks like. Suppose we have X subset of RD as the state space and phi t is the flow map. So given an initial condition, we apply the flow map. It gives the state of the system at time t. For a fixed lag time tau, we can obtain a discrete dynamical system giving the states. So the states at time t naught and then at time tau, 2 tau, and then we have this long trajectory. Then we can arrange this long trajectory into matrices. The matrix X is the state of the system at time t, and y is the time forwarded version of x. So for example, x could contain the initial conditions, let's say uniformly distributed, and then y is the solution of the system after time tau. Or if you have one long trajectory, we can arrange, let's say, first to n minus 1 in x, and then second to last in y. So again, y is the time forwarded version of x. Now, given this data only, our task now here is to obtain the relevant information about the system behavior from which this data is extracted. Okay, so there are different techniques to have a finite dimensional approximation of Koopman operator from data. Uh, Among the most well-known is EDMD, extended dynamic mode decomposition. It's an extension of dynamic mode decomposition, and what it does is select a subspace to approximate a Koopman operator. And for that, we need a set of dictionary, a set of basis functions, also known as dictionary, given by mathcalD here. Uh, so we select basis function from psi1 to psi n. That is, we want a n-dimensional subspace to approximate the Koopman operator. Then what we do is consider a vector valued map psi, which consists of all these basis functions, transform our data, which is d-dimensional, to this n-dimensional subspace. Psi1 is basically operator applied to the data, so it will be just psi of y. Then the EDMD minimizes this regression error here, Frobenius norm minimization, and it has a direct closed form solution for the matrix K, which is these given in terms of these covariance and cross covariance matrices. After we have this matrix representing the finite dimensional approximation of the Koopman operator, what we do is do the eigenvalue decomposition. Lambda I would be then the eigenvalue of our Koopman operator, projected Koopman operator. And then using this relation here, we can calculate the ith eigenfunction of the projected Koopman operator, where Vi is the ith eigenvector of K matrix. So having this finite dimensional matrix approximation can give us the eigenvalues and eigenfunctions of the Koopman operator projected onto the subspace spanned by the basis D. Okay. I hope you can see my cursor like when I am highlighting some text. Okay, so this is EDMD technique, which gives us the finite dimensional approximation of the Koopman operator. Then another task we can do in data-driven learning of dynamical systems is system identification, also known as SINDy, sparse identification of nonlinear dynamics. It is a special technique for finding the governing equations, which is of this form, like x dot is equal to bxt, where b is the function of state of the system. So it finds the terms present on the right hand side of our system of ordinary differential equations, and it solves a similar type of problem as EDMD. You can see it's minimizing the regression error between x dot and this psi transpose psi x. Here psi x is data in x transformed by the basis psi, as in the case of EDMD. Now this psi matrix here, which SINDy aims to find, contains the coefficient of the terms from the dictionary that are present in the right hand side of the governing equations. So this matrix psi, capital Psi here, is having the direct Frobenius norm minimization closed form solution, gives us the coefficients from the dictionary of the functions from the dictionary which are present on the right hand side. And then the dynamics can be approximated by x dot is approximately equal to psi transpose psi x, since this contains the coefficient. And then another similar kind of algorithm is for PDs, also known as PDE-FIND, but we can also say like SINDy for PDs. It identifies the PD of the form ut is some function of uxx, and so on. Again, it solves a similar kind of problem. Now, instead of finding a matrix, it finds this vector psi containing the coefficients of the terms present in this dictionary capital theta, and it minimizes the norm to give us the optimal vector psi representing the PD from the data. Okay, so selecting the right dictionary is an open problem. So we don't know the dictionary what to select from the start. You can see above, we have seen that all of these techniques require a set of basis functions, but we don't know how to select the optimal dictionary. Although there are other problems with these data-driven techniques, like since they are data-driven, The data must also be in the proper form, but here we are dealing with the problem in dictionary selection. So for transfer operator approximation, the main task is to get the eigenfunctions of the Koopman operator, because those are the functions that will give us the global behavior of dynamical system. And if the selected dictionary could not represent the eigenfunctions, like the dictionary is not rich enough, then obviously the approximation of eigenfunction would not be good enough, and then our analysis would also be not good enough. For SINDy, it's even extreme. Like if selected dictionary does not contain any term present on the right hand side, then definitely it cannot find the right governing equations, because no matter how much data we have, if we don't have the function present on the right hand side of the governing equation, then no regression error can reconstruct the exact dynamical system. So what we did is propose an algorithm to mitigate some of these issues. And how we do is to include a parametric basis in these algorithms. So instead of selecting the dictionaries fixed from the starting, we give flexibility to the basis functions in terms of parameters. So here you can see we redefine the basis b to be psi1 of x comma w1 up till psi n. So all of these or some of these dictionary will contain some parameters in them. Then the vector valued map, which will be used to transform the data using the basis, will contains parameters again. So using this basis now, we can reformulate the optimization problems in the above algorithm to get parametric EDMD, where now instead of minimizing the error with fixed basis, we are minimizing the error with respect to K, the Koopman matrix, and the parameters in the basis. Similarly for SINDy, we want to minimize the error with respect to the matrix representing the dynamics, that is psi, and also optimizing for the right parameters of the basis function, and similarly for PDEs. And we can do this, we can find this in using alternating optimization, and there's different optimization algorithms. We use gradient descent based techniques, and we see these algorithms are very flexible in terms of basis. So we can see this in numerical results. So for stochastic system, to approximate the Koopman operator, we consider this overdamped Langevin SD, where V is the potential of the system, beta is the inverse temperature, and we simulate this using Euler-Maruyama scheme to get the data matrices X and Y containing the trajectory of the system. So, and we tested it on different potentials. Here I am presenting the results for the triple well potential, which you can see is a complicated potential, but the thing to note here is that it has 3 wells presented in this slide. Presented here. So you can see there are some potential, there is a well here at -1, x1 at 1, and then a small well in the top. And to test the techniques, what we did is select Gaussian 2D Gaussian basis functions, all of them on the right hand side of the domain. Now, with the conventional EDMD, this wouldn't, it's like clear that the approximation would not be good because there's no information about the system on the left hand side of the domain. All the information is on the right hand side. But after we apply our parametric EDMD, you can see the basis functions are optimized now. They move towards left and they are expanding in bandwidth to cover the whole region of the system and give us the approximation of the eigenfunction of the triple well potential of the Koopman operator for triple well potential. So this, the figure D here is representing the second dominant eigenfunction, which already tells us about different wells present in the system. Yes, so the application of parametric SINDy could be seen from this example of modified Chua circuit. The governing equations are given by these equations here. You can see fx is the function present having this sign term, and It also has this parameter A. Since this is inside the signed term, it's impossible for traditional SINDy to find this parameter from data. So we generate data using these parameter values here and focus on the value of parameter A, which is 2.6. Then after getting the data, we select this dictionary having all these terms. And you can see we select this term sign with with omega W1 having a parameter. And we want to find the value here, pi over A, which will be 1.2. Okay, so the figure A here is telling us SINDy reconstruction error for different values of W1. So for different values of this sine function here with different W1, what would be the reconstruction error of SINDy? And you can see it's more than 0. But to have perfect reconstruction of dynamic, it should be exactly 0. It's exactly 0 at 1 point something, which is the exact value of pi over 2.6 from which the data is generated. So it's around 1.2 something. And for that value of basis, the reconstruction error is 0. So it's clear that SINDy cannot give zero reconstruction error unless we have the specific dictionary function sine 1.2x. But with our approach, you can have this parametric basis here and do alternating optimization to reconstruct the dynamics. And you can see the blue is the original dynamics and the orange is the dynamics reconstructed by the alternating optimization. And just to show an example of what would different basis function reconstruction look like, we are plotting here the reconstruction with W is equal to around the local minima here, 2.6. If we have this W here in dictionary, then the reconstruction is not perfect. It's distorted. Okay, so these are the applications of parametric basis. Now we move towards neural network-based approach, which is the second project of my PhD. So neural networks have been used in a wide variety of domains now to solve complex tasks for their flexibility and expressivity. And Koopman learning is a part of that domain. So we have different techniques like WAMPnets, deep DMD, and many others. And the basic idea is we use the neural networks, specifically the output layer of the neural network, to represent the basis function that we need to learn the operator. That is the basic idea. But then, based on their structure or the type of loss or error they are minimizing, there are different techniques. So the idea is same. We want the output layer of the network to be the nonlinear transformation we need for the basis for the operator approximation, or we can say to represent the basis. Okay, so and the traditional way of training these networks, or the most uh, common ways of training these networks, is backpropagation. And backpropagation is computationally expensive, especially when the network is deep, like there's multiple layers and it's wide. There are many neurons in the layers, each layer. Another problem is it can get stuck into local minima or saddle points, or especially when the loss surfaces are highly non-convex, which is common in deep learning models. Then other problems like exploding, vanishing gradients, again in deep neural networks, they are also sensitive to different hyperparameters like the learning rate of the optimizer. For example, Adam, for training with Adam, we have to choose a learning rate, the network structure, so on and so forth. So it's not, there have been more sophisticated techniques now to deal with these problems, but they are still problem like slow convergence and of the network is issue. Okay, so then we ask this question that do we really need deep learning of basis, or is there any other way? Based on these questions, we explored randomization based neural network, an example of which is RVFL, which stands for random vector functional link. neural network, and there are different randomization based neural network like ELM, extreme learning machine, reservoir computing, which is the recurrent version of randomization based neural network, so on and so forth. And there are different variants. But the idea behind them is that initialize the network with fixed hidden layer weights and biases and only train the output layer. That's the idea. So instead of doing back propagation to update the weights and biases of all the hidden layers, what we do is initialize them from some distribution and keep them fixed during the training and just learn the output layer. And then this has some multiple benefits, like it has lower computational complexity, definitely, because we don't train the whole network. It can give us closed form solution for the output layer, so we can have a minimizer in one go, global minimum, maximum, etc. It also comes with some disadvantages, uh, but it also seems to mitigate some of the common problems associated with deep learning. And then we use this idea in transfer operator learning. And again, this seems to mitigate the problems without a noticeable reduction in the accuracy in approximating the operators. This is just a brief overview of how randomized neural networks look like. You can see here, W is W and B are hidden layers, weights, and biases. You can have multiple hidden layers, but just for the sake of simplicity, we are just presenting here with one hidden layer. Then W output is WO is the output layer, and based on the task that we want to solve, classification, regression, we can formulate an optimization problem on this output layer weights. And taking the advantage of randomization, we can have a closed form solution for the output layer. It's just like doing regression. Okay, now how do we train randomized neural network for operator learning tasks? This is the question that we want to answer next. For that, and for the algorithm that we propose, variational principles are the backbone of the training here. And what does variational principle say? It says that if you want to approximate the ith eigenfunction, say phi I, of a self-adjoint operator A, and assuming that it is, let's say we have an ansatz function for phi I cap for the actual true eigenfunction phi I of the operator. Assuming that it is orthogonal to previous I minus 1 eigenfunctions, the maximum of this quantity here, which is also known as Rayleigh quotient, is the ith eigenvalue. And the maximizer is the ith eigenfunction itself. Or depending on the operator, it could be minimization as well, if you want to find, let's say, the minimum value. But the important thing is we can have, through this principle, we can have an optimization problem or loss function, say, through which we can optimize the output layer weights. Like our output layer can represent ansatz functions, and for each iteration, we can maximize or minimize this score to get the optimal approximation of the eigenfunctions. Now, these variational principles have been introduced for Koopman operator by Frank Noy and Felix Nuske. And based on this, we have a neural network architecture, which I've discussed above, BEMP nets. It does the same thing, but use like traditional way of training the networks. It also used this idea of using the output layer as the basis functions and then optimizing using variational principles and then approximating the eigenfunction. But we can see this variational principle is for general operators A. So can we use randomized neural network to approximate operators in general? Why only Koopman operator? So the answer is yes. We introduce RaNNDy for approximating different operators. The framework is very general, which we'll see in later slides. Okay, so this is the kind of architecture that we propose. Uh, There could be multiple hidden layers, but here just we are showing single hidden layer. And on the left side, you can see optimal basis approximator, where we say that the output layer of the network is representing the optimal basis function. And then we optimize the output layer, the one in orange. And you can see we are applying sigma to W naught times Rx. Rx is the randomized transformation. It belongs in Rn. Say we want n basis functions, but we can also take the advantage of randomization and directly ask the network to give us the optimal eigenfunctions rather than first optimizing the basis and then calculating the eigenfunctions. So what we can do is in the and right figure, you can see eigenfunction approximator. We can say that the randomized part of the network will already be a randomized basis, and the output layer will now give us the eigenfunctions that we want. So the green color thing you can see is phi x, which will be in Rn, representing the n dominant eigenfunctions that we want from the of the operator. Okay, so what are they doing and how they are doing? What is learning linear operators? So for a linear compact operator, for which we are interested in finding the eigenfunctions phi and eigenvalues lambda, satisfying this relation, a phi is lambda phi. Or for non-self-adjoint operators, we want to approximate singular values, sigma, or right and left singular functions, here chi I with I. So these are the spectral decompositions approximations we are interested in. And through randomized neural networks, we can use the output layer as the basis functions. You can see this psi is basis depending on the output layer weights W naught given by sigma, which is the activation of W naught transformed multiplied by the randomized part of the network. Okay, and now variational principle comes into play to train the network. So for any given ansatz function f, which could represent an eigenfunction, we have this Rayleigh quotient giving us this quotient in terms of covariance and cross covariance matrices C naught naught and C naught one. So that's the thing we want to optimize and we want to find. Okay, so when we have data from the system, we can easily approximate these autocovariance and cross covariance matrices, which will again be depending on W naught. If we, let's say, if we find the eigen, if we uh, want to, if we want our network to represent the basis function like the output layer, then these covariance and cross covariance matrices will be depending on output layer weights W naught, and they can be calculated easily using the given data points xi and yi, or when we are talking in terms of general operator, not just Koopman. So psi naught will be basis applied to all the data points in X with output layer W naught. You can see it's again similar to EDMD Rn cross M, that is the data matrix transformed by the basis to give us n cross M matrix. Psi1 would be the operator applied to the basis, which is again n cross M matrix. And then from the variational principle, we can, with each iteration, we can minimize or maximize this trace depending on the type of operator we want to approximate. Hence, we have a loss function to find the optimal output layer weights representing that will give us the optimal operator approximation. And these laws are consistent with the WAMP-R scores proposed by Hao Wu and Frank Noy in uh, these papers on variational approach for Markov processes, where they propose these WAMP-R scores also based on variational principle, but uh, in terms of the singular values and only for Koopman operators. Okay, so how now output layer can be representing eigenfunctions, the second type of network that I showed you in the RaNNDy figure. Again, taking the advantage of the randomization, what we can do is use the randomized part of the network as randomized basis, and then the output layer would represent the eigenfunction. The eigenfunction problem would be similar. What we'll say is, suppose we want to approximate small n eigenfunctions of the operator. We optimize the trace of this matrix here, where W naught is the output layer weights now, keeping them independent. And as usual, using the Lagrange multiplier methods, we can solve this optimization problem to have this final eigenvalue problem in which W naught is now the output layer weights representing the eigenfunctions of the operator. And here now this covariance and cross covariance matrices have been calculated using the randomized basis, which is just Rx in terms of the random neural network. Okay, for non-self-adjoint operators, we can use similar kind of optimization problem where now we, instead of eigenvalues and eigenfunctions, we are interested in singular values and singular functions. And yes, so and representing our right and left singular functions with different ansatz function, where W naught and W naught dash would be different output layers. We can formulate this eigenvalue problem using again the usual Lagrange multiplier methods to get this eigenvalue problem where W naught is now representing the right singular function of A, or we can also say the eigenfunctions of the operator A star A. Okay, so now RaNNdy has, we can see how it's used to directly, the output layer can directly represent eigenfunction for self-adjoint operator and how it can be used to represent singular functions of non-self-adjoint operator. Since this is general operator approximation framework, we also showed how it can be used to approximate different operators. For example, differential operators like the Schrodinger or Koopman generator, which is the generator of the Koopman operator, can be approximated. And it's very similar because with these highly optimized libraries, like the one I'm using is JAX here, we can calculate the gradients, Jacobian, Hessian, using automatic differentiation and approximate these operators, differential operators. Okay, so now we'll see some numerical results for RaNNdy. The first one is on the overdamped Langevin SD that I've discussed above with the potential as of the OU process, Ornstein-Uhlenbeck process, which is alpha by 2x square. With these values of the parameters, we generate the data. And this is a very good base example to consider to test the performance, because for this system, we already know the analytically computed eigenvalues and eigenfunctions given by here. And eigenfunctions are simply Hermite polynomials. And we see the numerical results match the analytical computations of RaNNdy. And then to compare it with VAMPnets, you can see it's also matching with VAMPnets. So we can see the techniques are clearly working. Okay, so to test on more complicated potential, we again used triple well potential from above, and then this lemon slice potential, which is basically a potential having n wells arranged in a circle, depending on this n here. So from this figure, you can see we choose n is equal to 5, so you have 5 wells here. Then what we did is approximate 5 dominant eigenfunctions of the Koopman operator and then cluster them into 5 sets. On the right figure B, you can see the clustering of those eigenfunctions. And these eigenfunctions are clearly telling us that there are 5 wells in the systems. And okay, the figures C and D are for triple well. But the interesting thing here to note is the color map here. Okay, so one of the benefits that we can also take advantage of from RaNNdy is in doing uncertainty quantification. So what we can do is sample from a distribution different weights and biases multiple times to create multiple models and have multiple approximations of eigenfunctions, and then do uncertainty quantification on these approximations, like using means and variances. The interesting thing we see here is, so this is the second eigenfunction of triple well potential. If you remember, we had the wells on x-axis at -1 and 1. So we see from the color map, the uncertainty is very low. So this right here is the uncertainty values on the color bar. And why is it happening is because in those wells, there are more data points. So the approximation is good there. So that's why we have less uncertainty. But on the remaining regions, the data points are very less. So uncertainty in approximation is very high there. And similar thing can be seen in figure D, which is the third eigenfunction, which is separating the first two wells from the third shallow well. And it's again telling us that on the wells, the uncertainty is low, and away from the wells, the uncertainty in approximation is high. This is another advantage that we can take from RaNNdy. Okay, so now we will see some high dimensional real world system. First of all, protein folding case. The video we saw of protein molecule. So we apply RaNNdy to protein molecule data, and these are the eigenfunctions evaluated in the trajectory data of Koopman operator. So these are the second dominant eigenfunction, which are giving us information about the global behavior of dynamics. Like, for example, if you focus on figure A, some of the values of these eigenfunctions are below 0, some are above 0. It's basically giving us the states in which the molecule is present. So the molecule is present mainly in two states, the folded and unfolded one. Similar cases with the second protein molecule in figure B, this second molecule that we consider, which is NUG2, very high dimensional. And it's also again telling us that the molecule is present in two different states, folded and unfolded. There could be multiple as well, but this is telling us that there is one folded, and within the other, let's say from 15,000 to the last, it could be partially folded or misfolded, but unfolded is clear from this. Okay, and figure C here is specifically showing the uncertainty in approximation. And interestingly, we can see the uncertainty for NUG2 is making sense in the sense that for the unfolded states of the system, the uncertainty is high because the molecule is chaotic in those places, as we have seen from the videos. So when the molecule is unfolded, it's unstable and very chaotic. So the uncertainty in approximation is high, but when it is folded, the uncertainty is low. Sorry, when it is folded, the uncertainty is low because it's mostly stable. These are the identified frames using RaNNdy. So from the whole trajectory of the system, let's say containing around 20,000 frames that we consider, these are the identified. Some of them I've shown in A, some of the folded state, and they are very stable. You can see from contact map. Okay, I forgot to explain contact maps. So the way we use these system to approximate Koopman operator is using the concept of contact map. Contact map is basically a 2 by 2 array representing the distance between different residue pairs of the protein molecule. So let's say if our protein molecule has 50 residues, which is the case with NUG2, it's around 56. Then it will be 56 by 56 matrix representing the containing the distances between different residues pair. And for each of the frame, So here you can see we consider more than 15,000, like let's say around, it should be around 20,000 frames. For each frame, we will have a vectorized form of this matrix containing the residue pair distances, which is a contact map for a snapshot. And then we have around 20,000 snapshots. So you can see it's already very high dimensional system with lots of data points. And then we identified these folded and unfolded states. And from the contact maps over all the identified frames here, so let's say we identified 12,000 folded frames from all these 20,000, you can see the contact map is very stable. Like it's showing that in almost all of the identified folded frames, there are some contacts. And in unfolded identified frames, there is barely any, there is very low contacts. Okay, the interesting part about RaNNdy in terms of computational complexity, computational time comparison is you can see it has advantage over MapNets, like it dramatically decrease the training time within a second, in which is also the case with molecular dynamics as well, high dimensional. So within a second, you can get the optimal eigenfunctions as compared to training it heavily and then optimizing the getting the optimized eigenfunctions. Okay, then for the Schrodinger operator approximation, we consider this quantum harmonic oscillator, which is again very simple one-dimensional example, but just we choose it because it has analytically calculated eigenvalues and eigenfunctions. And on comparison, you can see it's already matching very well. So RaNNdy is able to approximate Schrodinger operator. Going to example of non-sulfide joint operators. So for non-reversible systems, transfer operators are non-sulfide joints. So we, instead of finding now the eigenfunctions, we find the singular functions, or let's say the eigenfunction of the forward-backward operator, which is composition of Koopman and Frobenius. But we can say it the singular function of the transfer operators. And you can see the singular functions in figure A and B are already telling us the structure of coherent sets, like decomposing the states into main uh, coherent sets from top and bottom, and this B is telling us these coherent structure. And finally, C, which is the main figure here, is the clustering of 9 dominant eigenfunctions into 9 clusters, and you can already see it's telling us all the coherent structure present in the data. And we have seen this in the video in starting that some of the particles were moving coherently. So it identifies exactly those particles which were coherent. These sets are the coherent structure here that we can see. Okay, so to finally conclude the talk, we introduced parametric EDMD, parametric SINDy to include interpretable and parametric basis functions to have a better approximation of Koopman operator or the governing equations, identifying the governing equations. Then we introduce randomized neural networks, which efficiently approximate different operators without being heavily trained. So we don't have to use backpropagation on them necessarily. So it saves us a lot of time, which basically means that the random feature map that is generated by RaNNdy is already a suitable basis for approximating the operator. Then another benefit is having closed form solution, which we have seen in the eigenvalue problems that we have seen. So solving an eigenvalue problem directly give us the output layer weights representing the eigenfunctions of the operator. And then another is the uncertainty quantification of results and so on. Okay, so with that, I will conclude my talk here. And thank you all for your attention and joining. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Hi, Tabish. First of all, I have a question.
Yeah,
First of all, thank you so much for the wonderful talk. Uh,
yeah.
so for the RaNNdy, for the Koopman operator, like on page slide